First of all, thank you very much for such a warm intro, Ivan. I really appreciate that. And at first, just a question for the audience: is anyone doesn't understand Russian here? Okay, so just one person. Yeah, because two persons. Perfect. Thank you. Because originally I thought to give this a talk in Russian, but all the slides are in English, so it's not an issue for me to switch to English. It should be quite straightforward for you as well. So when I've got a call from Ivan just 2 weeks ago, I thought, he said, Sveta, come and join our wonderful conference. And it was something totally odd for me, because I am not a .NET developer. Please raise your hands here who are not .NET developers. Is anyone? Oh, I'm not the only one. Thank you. And of course, I would never ever apply by myself for this conference, because definitely this talk is something totally different. And I thought, well, I've got so many stories about startups, and I don't need even slides, just one slide, and here you can see everything. That's the real life of a startup, of the founder, of many startup community people. But I think the conference team would not be happy with just one slide. So yeah, I've got proper slides. So today, this talk is going to be mainly for developers. I'm not going to talk about just business models and some marketing stuff. And I do remember myself 3 years ago when I was a developer, a pure developer. I was writing mostly on using JVM languages such as Java and Scala. And I would never go for this talk because it's marketing bullshit. So yeah, let's go. And probably first it's a small disclaimer. It's just my personal view, my personal opinion, my personal experience. Here I do not represent any companies, although I do run my own company in the UK, but it's just my personal talk. And I'm not a lawyer, and that means it's not a legal advice. And another quite important thing to mention, my opinion is evolving as well, because I'm growing up, and obviously it's going to be different at some point. So why do you want to listen to me? Probably, I'm just curious. Does anyone know about podcast, the DevZen podcast? Okay, quite a few, not a lot. Okay, probably you don't know me because I was mostly in JVM community, and that's briefly about myself, just a little bit. I do run the podcast, and I'm a geek inside because I was a very, very hardcore developer. I've been doing something mostly backend Java web development, oriented on highly load, and my last project was connected to data processing in highly loaded and highly scaled systems. And at the same time, I do quite a few things for voluntarily. I am an ambassador from Tech City UK. I help other bright individuals to get cool tech visas for the UK if they would like to come and do something different, quite outstanding things sometimes. And yeah, that's briefly about myself. And yeah, why do I know about startups? 3 years ago, I've got an email from Entrepreneur First. Entrepreneur First is an accelerator in London, which is quite well known in the community. And what's the difference between this accelerator and any other accelerator? And the main difference that you don't need to have a team, you don't need to have an idea. They accept people based on your technical skills, based on your technical knowledge. And they help you to find a co-founder, to iterate on different ideas, and prove whether you can be a co-founder, whether you can be an entrepreneur, and they help you. And they know how to work with technical people. And the main idea behind this accelerator to create deep tech startups, that's what they call deep tech. Mostly it's all about machine learning, artificial intelligence, robotics, sometimes aerospace or something like that. And basically, I decided that it sounds like a huge opportunity, why not? And I accepted the offer, and I've moved to the UK approximately 2 years ago in March 2016. And basically, my experience is not very successful so far, because most of the people from the startup community, they come to the stage and they share cool, successful stories. And the problem with these people, they don't see like the real life, because there are so many cool books about how to run a business, but the reality is different. And even if you read all the books, it's not the same as you run it by yourself. And just imagine for a software engineer, backend developer, it's extremely hard to start something different. It's not about writing code. It's not about, doing some refactoring. It's about selling. It's about marketing. It's about customer development. I didn't know that. And just imagine, for me, I didn't speak English very well. Luckily, right now, I can do that much better. But 2 years ago, I was so shy. I was barely speaking English, and of course, the British accent is terrible. Probably it sounds nice, but the reality is different. So, yeah, for example, what happens right now if you imagine the situation? You've got a job offer or just a call or email from a startup, like a promising startup from Minsk, and most of the people in Belarus, they know about the last law from our president, decree number 10 or 9, I don't remember. Doesn't matter. Anyway, the decree, the law. So basically, we are quite excited because we obviously almost everyone have heard about iMatter, Masquerade, well-known companies from Belarus, successful companies. At least this is how it looks like. And we think, well, I think I would like to join this beautiful unicorn and do a startup and sell it to Apple or Microsoft. And there is a very famous person, Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook, and when she got her job offer from Facebook, she said, it's a rocket ship, and that's quite important because that's great, a rocket ship. One letter, and it's a huge difference. And the question for you, how do we understand which letter to use? Because in advance, we don't know that, which is the right one. And let's say, if we accept a job offer from how we think the next unicorn, it might be not the right letter, and you might feel something different. So the goal of my talk today, to share what I've learned, failing, and failing again. And I'm not afraid to say that, because that's the reality. And probably help you guys, developers, folks, how to evaluate startups, how to understand whether you need to join or not, whether it's a ship or something else. Previously on the slide about myself, you could have seen so many titles. Yes, I do wear many hats. And the goal of this talk today to prove to you that you need to wear many hats as well. The idea, the initial idea was to bring several hats and just put on the real hat and say, for example, right now I'm an investor and I think as an investor. And that's what you need to do. You need to think as an investor from the beginning. That's the first step, how to evaluate a startup. And how do investors think? They think like from the money perspective purely. And this abbreviation called ROI, does anyone know this in this abbreviation? Okay, so I think it's quite new for you. That's good, something new. It's called return of investments, and basically that's if you invest money, you expect something to get something back and something bigger. And the goal to understand how much to invest, because you as a developer, you invest your time and you invest your resources, and the only one resource that you have is just time. You will never ever be able to earn like all the money in the world. It's just impossible. And what you need to do, just because you will be spending your own time, the only one resource you have, like in the reality. And another quite important thing to mention is called opportunity cost. The opportunity cost is another possibility, like the other option you can get. For example, from like one side, you can start a startup, you can join a startup, one option. And probably in a few years you'll become successful. Probably your startup will exit successfully and you will be rich. Or from the other side, you can join a well-known company, let's say Microsoft, Apple, Facebook. It's not as hard as you think, and it's all about your preparation. It's doable, absolutely. So that's the opportunity cost. And when you see the founder, that's me in the accelerator, I was learning how to pitch properly. And basically, when you see the founder, you will probably get 3 points from the pitch: problem, solution, traction, team. And you need to evaluate all 4 options. To evaluate these 4 options, from the investor's point of view, there is a special process called due diligence. So, do you know due diligence? Have you ever heard of it? Okay, not a lot. So basically, it's a legal process. There are 2 parts of this process. It's like tech and legal. When any investor is going to invest some significant amount of money, or even not very significant, they need to prove to themselves that it's a good opportunity. And for that, you have to understand whether this startup, the founders, are doing what they're doing, what they're saying. Because sometimes you can get some pitches from cool startup founders. We are doing something cool, something significant, but the reality is different. They just decided to, use an existing library, a few open source repositories, and they say, we will change the world. That's the reality of startups. That's why you need due diligence. And the main question, because from a technical point of view, as a developer, I can do due diligence by myself. I can understand the technical feasibility of a startup I'm going to join. And the problem is the legal due diligence. And basically, the main question you will ask yourself and the startup: how defensible is the idea? And in your point of view, what do you think the most important part in a startup, when the startup is being acquired? I'm not talking about acqui-hiring, I'm talking about acquiring. What do you think? Any ideas? I don't hear, guys, let's...
What are the signing conditions?
Not really. So,
what are the options for exit?
For example, we've got a startup is successful and it's been acquired by Apple, and they decide to acquire startup because of one main reason from a legal point of view. And from a legal point of view, okay, I will tell you. So it's called IP, intellectual property, not people, not the team. Well, the team of course as well, but the IP is the most important part in a startup. I know it's terribly boring and like to talk about like legal stuff for developers. It's extremely boring, but believe me, that's the only one thing that matters for VCs, for you as an investor as well. Because if, let's say, a startup doesn't know how to deal with legal documents, you will be screwed. And I can give you some, I can share some cool stories. I promise to share some cool stories. So it's a real story about one startup. There were two founders. One founder A, founder B. So they were working on different ideas, and one idea was quite promising. They have spent just kind of like few weeks working on this idea, and at some point, one co-founder said, "Look, I'm gonna do this idea by myself only, and because I know how to do both sales and tech, and I can sell this prototype to someone else, and I don't need you, another co-founder." And like, if everything was like were right, it would never be happen, because the IP that they were developing internally should belong to the company. But unfortunately, they didn't sign one very important document. It's called IP assignment. That means, that states that all the IP that's been developed by people in the company belongs to the company. When you sign any job offer or any job contract, there is a clause that says all IP, like know-how, which you've developed, being in the company, belongs to the company. Sometimes, some companies say something like that. All the IP that you've developed in your even spare time belongs to the company. Say hello to Facebook. So basically, in this case, it might be a significant problem. Let's say you've came up with a cool idea in your spare time, let's say on summer holidays, winter holidays, and imagine if that belongs to the company. It's, in this case, you are screwed. So another quite important point, you need to know who you're working with. VCs and in other venture capitalist VCs and other investors, they tend to do like a very very important thing when you invest into a company. That's the important thing and quite crucial thing, reference checks, and they do everything, like they check everything. They check your LinkedIn, they check your profile, social media, and they check your references. And as a developer who is considering joining a startup, you have to do your homework, and your homework to check whether the founder is exactly what he or she says. So, because you can find like a startup founder who says, "I know how to do sales, I know how to do marketing, I know how to I've got some cool probably companies that are willing to invest into the startup," but it might not be true. People tend to lie. People do lie, unfortunately. And you have to check that. And it might be boring, but trust me, it will save so much time for you in the future, and probably so much money in the future. And there is quite interesting thing for reference checks. In London and in the UK, there is an organization called Companies House. I'm pretty sure there's something like that should be in Belarus. It's like an open register of all companies. So, another story, reference checks. When I was preparing for the talk, I didn't have anything to say about like .NET, but I've got something to say. So, do you know the company which is called Skyscanner? Who knows this company? Okay. Does anyone know how this company is connected to .NET? Okay, let me show you something. So basically, it's a main page of Companies House in the UK. It's like a free database. You can go to this website and check any UK-based company, you can enter name, surname, company name, everything, and you will get some information. And basically for this information with Skyscanner, yeah, look at that. That's the original name of the company. It's been founded in 2001, And that's the name of the company, Solutions for .NET Limited. Now it's Skyscanner. So such a coincidence, because I was thinking about like what kind of company can I show you like as an example, and apparently I've got this like coincidence. It's nice. So another cool resource is called Crunchbase, and a year ago Crunchbase helped me to deny an offer from another promising startup. So and here there is a special service called Due Deal. It's another UK-based company that parses all the data available about every company in the UK, at least in the UK, and shows the details, financial metrics, which are quite crucial for you if you are thinking of accepting an offer or not. So I promised you a story about another promising startup. So basically, I've got an offer, very nice offer, and I was considering to join a startup a year ago, and everything was fine up to the point when I decided to check this company on Crunchbase. So what do we see here? Basically, on Crunchbase, we can see rounds of investment. And here, we see quite interesting thing. Round A, Series A, and Series B are equal. It's not a good sign usually, because companies tend to grow, and every round ideally should be bigger than the previous one, because it shows that the company is growing. In this case, something has happened, and like I was concerned about that. And before accepting the job offer, I asked the founder for a coffee, and I asked him directly what happened, why do we see these numbers? And apparently he said that one of the co-founders has left, the CTO. That's the result. So once you see any company on Crunchbase which is trying to hire you, but you will see these numbers, you need to ask the people who are hiring you what's going on here, because it's not a good sign. Sometimes it's okay because some other changes in the direction, maybe the company became profitable and they don't need any investment, but usually it's a good sign that something is happening in the company. Be cautious about this. Another hat, it's a hat of entrepreneur. So the hat of entrepreneur, you need to, it's like this your second role when you are accepting an offer. You need to think about yourself as an entrepreneur, and you need to talk to the founders, and you don't need to be, don't be afraid talking about money. I remember how tough it was for me to speak about money on interviews. Technical questions, okay, I know, design patterns, algorithms, everything is fine up to this point when I need to negotiate my salary. And I didn't feel quite confident doing that. If you're talking to a startup founder, these people are often quite okay speaking about money. If they're not okay, you should not join the startup. So founders think using these terms P&L, profit and loss, and unfortunately developers are loss, because we generate losses, and literally companies need to pay developers quite huge salaries in comparison to the sales department, where salespeople, they bring money to the company, which is obviously a good sign for every company. So, but every time you negotiate your job offer, there are 4 points, there are 4 parts in your offer: base salary, stocks, benefits, and bonus. It's kind of common practice. I hope in Belarus, every company, every startup will follow the same rule, but I think right now we tend to use just base and probably sometimes options. Benefits, so-so. Stocks, not quite often. So you have to, when you are reviewing your case, when you're reviewing your job offer, think about all these cases. Another thing that you need to talk through the founders, the term sheet. Term sheet is a document that the founders of the company, they get from a VC. It means it's like a letter of intent that the VC company is going to invest into the startup, and it's just 1 or 2 pager. If this company, if the company you're thinking of, like got this term sheet, it means everything is quite good. It means they were able to find a VC or like another investor who is willing to invest, which is definitely a good sign. It means the founders are capable of selling, which is the most important like part of their startup founder. So the second thing you need to ask about capitalization table. If startup founders are not willing to share this information, especially for new employees, especially for first employees in a startup, I would think carefully about the startup, because it means you will be like the first developer hired, or like one of the first developers hired, and they won't be willing to share like all the details about the company, about who owns the company. So capitalization table says who is the owner of the company, who is the owner of the shares in each at every stage of investment process. And basically, if they are hiding someone, it's not a good sign. Probably think twice before joining the company. So you need to ask about the business model. How are they thinking of making money? And if they say, we'll just do some cool tech and we will figure it out, I have bad news for you, because most likely it's gonna fail. So what's your exit strategy? Very good question, because you need to know whether your company is willing to do an IPO or acquisition, acqui-hiring, and acquisition, acqui-hiring, quite interesting things, because unfortunately here in Belarus, we tend to just sell companies and we don't grow these companies. I know we are quite early in the whole the ecosystem is just growing. We are very early stage, but still I would love to see startups in Belarus that are willing to grow the team, to have the team in Belarus, not not just sell engineers to the abroad. So what happens next? Another quite important thing to mention, option pools. So as an employee in a startup, you will get an option pool. You will get options. What does it mean? Option is an opportunity for you to buy shares in a startup, but considering by current price, which is usually quite low. And for the UK company, they tend to have 10% reserved for employees as for options. For companies in the States, they tend to have 20%, which is better. And basically, you'll get options. But it's not enough to say, OK, I've got 1 million options. We remember this 1 million. And I hope it's okay with code of conduct. So basically, 1 million options we've got from the company. What does it mean? How many are there, in general? And if there are 1 trillion of options available, it's one thing. If you've got, let's say, 100 options, but there are 1,000 options, it's a good story. So it's quite important to ask these questions, because if they say, oh, we'll give you just 1 million options, have fun. And it's not enough, because the next question, okay, I've got some options, but how do I turn them into money? And it's quite an interesting thing, because you need to execute your options. And you can execute your options once the company is doing exit. And it might not happen, and it tends to not happen, according to stats. And basically, when you are executing your shares, your options, it means you are buying options. You're buying stocks by the previous price, and it means you need to pay that, for these options, for these stocks, in cash. And sometimes it might be quite a huge amount of money, and usually the company gives you from 7 days to 90 days to execute your options, and you need to find enough money to buy the stocks. Like otherwise you will lose them. Sorry. And yeah, just ask your company, the startup you're thinking of, like when do I execute my options? Like how much time do I have for that? Some companies like Pinterest, they provide loans for employees to execute their options. So another thing you need to think about is vesting. Vesting means you're not getting all the options. You need to spend some time in a startup. Like typically, it's 4 years vesting and 1 year cliff. What does it mean? So that's a graph. Let's say that's all your options. And during the first year, you will, if you decide to quit the company after the first year, you will lose all your options. You will not get anything. And after the first year, you start vesting, your options start to vest, and during the first months, you will get 25% of your options. And then gradually, month by month, you will be getting more and more options. So, and it's a good question for you, whether you're able to commit for 4 years to work for a startup, which most likely is going to die soon. And just imagine for years, for like our industry, for like IT industry, it's a lot. It's a huge time. And in this case, there is a huge opportunity that you just spend lots of time, effort, and you will not get anything. Just be aware of that. So another thing, good leaver and bad leaver. When you sign this document called shareholder agreement from the company, there might be a clause called good leaver and bad leaver. What does it mean? Let's say, like after 4 years, you vested all your options, and let's say you've got a tough conversation with your boss, and or maybe you decided to do something on your own, and it means they can say that you are a bad leaver and you lose all your options, nothing, and you're fired. Totally legal because you signed this contract. So be cautious about this when if you're thinking about startups. Non-compete clause. It's a tricky one because not every country supports that. And in the UK, yes, there are non-compete clauses in contracts, but as far as I know, there were no legal cases about that. So companies don't like these clauses. And yeah, but just in case, if any company says, please sign a non-compete for 5 years, 1 year, 2 years, it's a lot. 6 months, that's okay. That's all you can have, because even British banks say just 6 months, so not more than 6 months. Another question, why do you want to build a startup? If you're joining as an early stage employee, you need to believe into this idea, into this company, and you need to start with why. Why are you doing this? If you don't enjoy this, if you're joining a startup just because you think you can be rich at some point, I have bad news for you, unfortunately. And there is a very cool graph by Paul Graham from Y Combinator. And what the most interesting part about this graph is this one, this part, like a desert of sorrow. When everything, in the beginning, we are so happy. We've got, featured on TechCrunch, Tootbuy, Onlineerbuy. They wrote about our startup. Okay, then what's next? And next, you need to work, and you're not getting any, special promo from mass media, because you need to work on your startup, and probably you start figuring out that something is not working properly, your idea is not very good. That's where you are. And you need to either keep working or just break up and do something else. And it's a really tough time, just because it might be 1 year, might be 2 years, might be 4 years, 5 years. Are you sure? How sure are you that you definitely want to work on this specific project? Most likely there are some other projects that are quite interesting for you as well. So be ready for ups and downs. That's the reality. And Like every day you will feel that something is not working properly. Sometimes you will have good days, but that's a startup life. So in the last one, if like the last hat you need to think of is hat of an engineer. Only the last one. And there is a problem. There are two options for if you're joining a startup. Most likely, like as a developer, at least from my own experience, 3 years ago, I said I would never ever I don't like learning something which is not quite interesting to me. I wanted to be like a hardcore backend developer only, work on server-side projects, highly loaded server-side projects, and that's the only like top one goal. And if you're joining a startup, unfortunately, you won't be able to work on something quite deep. You have to be broad in your knowledge. You will be doing DevOps, you will be doing front-end, back-end, and we are pretty aware of so-called full-stack developers, aren't we? So I was afraid of becoming this so-called full-stack developer because I wanted to be like a good, like proper programmer in who knows all the details about JVM in a startup. And in a real-world environment, you need to know much more because the reality is different. You will be constantly dealing with changes, like pivots. Startups are like most likely are just mess because people who are creating startups, in many cases, they didn't have any management experience, and you will feel that quite easily. You will feel that, and for some people, it's totally an acceptable option because you would like to have like a proper process, concrete plan, concrete tasks. In a startup, most likely you won't have that, and you will be writing lots of code, and you will be throwing away lots of code as well. So be prepared. Engineering mindset will be different. You will think differently, and you will see that maybe your priorities will become different after a few years, a few months working in a startup, because you will see what generates money, what generates our high salaries. And trust me, and it took me 2 years to understand that what generates our high salaries is not just Java backend development. It's much more, and it's there is a huge world around startups to create this high valuations, high salaries as well. So it took me a while to understand that. Another quite important thing to mention, every company is dysfunctional in some sense. Every company. And your goal to find what kind of dysfunctionality this company has is we all remember Tolstoy and the famous citation from Anna Karenina. So how do you do that? Basically, I've got some tips, just one very little one. Just ask the same question developers and top-level managers. One simple question. Which one? Basically, how do developers know which task to take? Ask developers, ask managers. What do they say? And just compare. And you will see how they think about the processes. And that's the easiest way to understand the level of dysfunctionality of each company. For me, these are my criteria for a company, for thinking about the startup. It's really important for me to be able to learn, and if I would accept an offer, definitely it's just being able to learn. Another thing, I need to be passionate about the project that company is doing, and I don't like to work for one more copycat of Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat. It's just, what's the point? I mean, I'm spending my life. That's the only one thing I have for something that is useless. I mean, I would prefer to spend my life on something that is important, that changes many lives, not just writing funny, something. So a very special case if you're offered a role of a CTO. So I've been there, and I was struggling. I do remember myself, like every day I was waking up and saying, gosh, I am losing my competence. I'm becoming less valuable as a developer. And I was like every morning I was waking up and saying, okay, I was a very hardcore Java developer. I was dealing with threads. I was dealing with GC, tuning. It was so cool, so fun. And now I'm just writing this yet another web page using JavaScript, CSS, HTML. And I've spent so much time for my education to understand how to do some advanced math. And now I'm just doing some JavaScript. I was so frustrated, and probably that was one of the reasons why my first idea didn't work out, and I decided to start looking for a job. And what I've realized that after having this experience in a startup, I still remember everything. My fingers remember everything, and it's quite interesting because I was able to get much better job after working on my startup, not doing just only hardcore development, because I was able to see things from a bit different perspective, from a higher perspective, from a high-level perspective. That is quite important for many companies. If you are, as a developer, can think from many heads, you can speak easily with the sales department, with marketing department, with business development people. They are not useless. Trust me, they are not useless. And after 2 years running startups and doing something in the space, I realized that it's a really hard job. And it's not just having some cool conversations over coffee with customers, with just writing emails. I thought it takes lots of effort to understand people and deal with people. It's not as easy. Just try it out and you will see. And for engineers, for those who are considering the role of the CTO, it's like a perfect book, perfect one, which is written by an engineer. She was growing from an engineer to engineer manager, VP of engineering, and she was a CTO. And basically, this is an amazing book, highly, highly recommend. It's not just buzzwords and marketing. It's a really good one. So basically, quite interesting thing about us. What I found out about myself, especially having so many conversations with business people from London. Every time I introduce myself, they ask about my background. Okay, my background is in engineering, blah blah blah. Then I say my name, Svetlana Bozhko. Then they realized, okay, I'm most likely I'm from Eastern Europe. Next question, oh, you are Russian hacker. So, and they immediately, like a direct link between these two ideas, and immediately they want to just hire me as an engineer, and that's it. It's like I was trying to have proper business conversations. Instead, they just wanted to hire me as a coder, and that's it. And it's probably it's a good thing if you want to be hired as a programmer only, but if you want to grow, it's an issue, like a tiny one. So basically, first employee and founder, the difference is quite significant in terms of upside, because if the startup is successful, the founders will get almost everything. First employee doesn't get a lot, usually 1% or so, and it's not a lot. So I would not probably work as a first-time employee. So probably one more tip, very tiny one. If you're hired as a contractor, let's say for European company or for the company in the States, you're not getting any bonuses, you're not getting any benefits, and most likely you're not getting any shares, any options, because it's like a benefit for employees. Technically, you're not an employee, and legally you're not covered. Make sure your company, the company that you're working for, remotely, usually it's remotely, has special agreement with you, because you are not an employee, and if this company is successful and if it's been acquired, you will not get anything. And I've got so many cool stories from my friends from Russia who used to work for successful companies in the States. They didn't get anything after acquisition. So probably it's a good question for me, would I ever join a startup? I invite you to have a separate conversation about that with myself. And the last slide is just one of the latest articles about Google. One engineer wrote it, quite interesting one, about why he left Google. And I just want to mention that yes, company are trying to create kind of family environment. The question is why? Think about it. It becomes quite easy for them to ask you to work more hours, to spend more time at work, basically working for free. And that's kind of tough, but it's difficult, but we need to admit that. And the reality that you've got business relationships between you as a developer and your company. You're providing service, you're getting paid for this. That's the reality. So yeah, basically that's it. Thank you very much. That's a podcast, you can listen to it, and thank you. Before any questions, I've got some gifts from London. These are 3 boxes, are for you for good questions.
Best questions get prizes. Thank you very much, Sveta, for a great talk. As a person working in a startup, can definitely relate to a lot of things that you covered, so thanks for me personally. Who's the first to ask a question? All right.
Okay, so I was in a similar situation. I was working for a startup that got acquired for $3 billion. Mm-hmm. And after 1 year of acquisition, I was asking this question: is the business failing? Because there were, Walmart had acquired Jet, and Walmart had its own vested interest. And I don't want to talk too much about the internal politics right now, especially with the camera. But the question I have is, if you're in a similar situation, how do you identify that? It's a very tricky thing. How do you identify it's time to leave? Company got acquired, sure, you made your options, you encashed your options on. Slowly, at one point of time, you have to make a decision. Do I want to stay? This is not a startup, right? I don't have any. Do I want to stay or do I want to leave? What are the criteria I use to make that decision?
A year ago, I was working for a brilliant startup in London. Unfortunately, I cannot say this company in loud because there is a recording and there is a special clause in my contract. But I'm happy to share this information privately. So I left this company after just a few months working there because I was not happy. Every morning I was waking up earlier, at 6, to spend more time before company. Because I'm spending my personal time doing something which is interesting for me, and then only after that I took the longest bus, the longest road to my work, and then go through a very nice park, to prepare myself mentally to came to the company. Obviously, it was not the best company to work in for me because, probably the company is okay. Probably it was just a wrong mismatch for me. And I think just think about opportunity cost because you're spending your life. That's the time you will never get back, never ever. And it took me 3 months to understand that it's probably not the right option. And yeah, basically just every morning, when you're waking up, go to the mirror in your room, look at yourself and ask, honestly, do I like my job? If you're answering no for more than 2 weeks, probably it's time to leave. Your life is much more valuable.
In my case, it was more of, it's not it wasn't like I was not liking the job. I felt like there's a better opportunity waiting for me. So it wasn't a negative, what's more positive? Is my current job or the new job? It ultimately boiled down there.
What I found out that you can go to your manager and say, I don't like it. Can we do something about this? That's the job of your manager, to make sure you like your job, you enjoy going at work every day. Just talk to your manager and say, I don't like it, what we can do about this? And if they say, well, there are some other options, blah, 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 they usually they have to have some plans, some concrete steps to deal with these situations. And probably you can go to your manager's manager and say, you know what, this person doesn't help me. And it's perfectly fine, especially for Western companies. For our Eastern European culture, is wait, it's weird. It's not okay. It's okay. That's your life. That's your interest. You can do that. But of course, after acquisition, most likely you won't get your shares. after, like, unless you spent 2 or 4 years in the company after after
guys, I
acquisition.
propose that we keep this discussion offline
Yep.
then, and we go back to other questions.
Yeah.
So we stay on schedule. We have a question over there.
Yeah, this probably continues the talk actually. The infamous work and life balance. Can you compare it in a regular company, so-called, and in a startup? Doesn't it mean that for a startup you actually sacrifice your life totally? There is no balance anymore. Every hour of your workday, not even workday, just day, is a startup, is working for a startup. Did you have this experience, you could still separate your day into working and non-working hours?
It's a tough one. Like, I can answer no. There is no work-life balance. Forget about it. If you're working for a startup, especially if you're a founder, and like it's a tricky one, because if you work full time and like you spend 12 hours a day working, would you be productive? Would you be more productive working, regular hours? And you're constantly asking yourself, but I'm working for my own company. It's like if everything goes right, I can be super successful, I can be rich, maybe. So I think there is no work-life balance. And I was talking to many entrepreneurs, like in London. There are so many cool stories. I would never ever like say these stories on camera, because it's just a bit not appropriate. But anyway, most of startup founders, they are looking for ways to distress themselves. Let's call it this way. So there are many options to do that. And one of the easiest ones, just go to the gym every day, and it helps a lot. But many startup founders, they literally kill themselves. They work in long hours, day after day after day, and after a month, 2 months, year, or just some time, they feel they got really big problems with their health. And is it worth it or not? It's a question for you. But again, if you're an employee and the startup founders, they ask you to work long hours, the upside is very low for an employee. I wouldn't do that. Because most likely it means that the startup founders, they don't know how to manage time, how to organize work, how to make sure that you work from let's say 9 to 5, or kind of regular working hours, maybe flexible working hours, but regular. Because you won't be productive in a long term. You need to think about long term. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Okay, so we have time for just one last short question. Let's do it this way.
Thanks for the presentation. You said about intellectual property and company's property.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about if my own application, my own startup was developed on my company's laptop, for example? It doesn't belong to me or company?
In most cases, it belongs to the company, and I strongly advise you, do not use your company laptop for your personal needs. Never do that, just in case.
It was developed out of the work,
It's still a company. It is still a company's property, and you have to search carefully in your job agreement, in your contract for that. But in most cases, because tech companies tend to have kind of flexible working hours, which means you could be working remotely, you could be working in your spare time as well, because it's required by the company. And it might mean that you are working on something company related. So never do that. Just don't do that.
Thanks.
All right, so I see we have some more questions, but the schedule is tough as always. As in any startup, our conference is a startup, right? So we'll keep the questions.
Gifts.
Yeah, we'll keep the questions for the afterbody, but for now we'll give Sveta a chance to give out the gifts.
Work-life balance. There is no work-life balance, but there is a gift. Okay, that's one. Another one for the lady, for
Pass
IP.
it.
And yeah, that's for you.
All right, so thanks Sveta once again for a great talk, and
Thank you.